Hello, welcome to the Wildline Podcast. I'm your host, Dan. This is a podcast about movies and how much money they make at the box office. I am starting to get a new group of listeners after some hard work. So I appreciate you if you are just checking out the show for the first time. It's available on every single platform you can possibly think of. I think I've just got added to Spotify, and I gotta get myself added to TuneIn. But I do appreciate you guys checking out the show. If you want to interact with me or ask me a question, Twitter and YouTube. YouTube comments are usually what I check the most, but I also do check Twitter. So thanks for listening, guys, and thanks for getting involved with the show. So today, obviously this week I'm pretty late. I had people in town, couldn't really do a Sunday show. Have been recovering here for the last couple of days, so I'm finally getting around to do a show. So I will do kind of the typical walk through the top 10, what happened over the weekend. We will take a look at what happened the last couple of days at the box office, just so I don't feel like I'm not giving you some new information about what's going on. And then we'll talk about what's going to happen this upcoming weekend and maybe walk a little bit through what's happening in August. But let's dive right into the top 10 from last weekend. Obviously number one last weekend, the actuals came in Monday. Number one was Mission Impossible Fallout, coming in at $61.2 million. Its per theater average was a very healthy $14,000 per theater. Got a cinema score of A, so people loved it. The Rotten Tomatoes score was a 97. The audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, I know we are not supposed to use that, was a 92. I just want to throw it out there. Average rating from critics, the actual scores that they gave on Rotten Tomatoes was 8.4 out of 10. Among top critics, it was 8.5, so pretty similar. Also, a 98% there on Rotten Tomatoes. So the baseline story is this. Critics absolutely gushed over this film. This is the absolute critical high point of the Mission Impossible series. And we sort of knew that going into this release. The buzz was off the charts. People were hyping it like it's Dark Knight. It's like Mad Max Fury Road. They were throwing out these sort of crazy comparisons. So we knew that the quality was very high. The question was, were people going to really show up for this? And they did. Early in the weekend, it was looking more like a high 50s opening, 57 to 60. But the numbers really warmed up on Saturday and Sunday and ended up doing 61.2 million. So what does that sort of mean in terms of this series? So this is the sixth movie in the Mission Impossible series. The original Mission Impossible came out May 22nd, 1996, which is almost, oh my God, it's 22 years ago. I feel so old right now. That did 180 domestically. It opened up at 45. Now, obviously, I'm not using adjusted numbers. I'm just going to go with the straight actual numbers that happened back then. A lot of inflation has happened over the last 22 years. So take these numbers with a little bit of a grain of salt. As we get closer, they'll be a little bit more accurate, but that was actually what it made. Closed out at 180, did 457 worldwide. Huge smash success. Production budget was only $80 million. A huge win for Tom Cruise back then, and really launched this series with a bang. Mission Impossible 2 opened up 4 years later, May 24th, 2000. It opened up at $57 million, so a big increase from the first one. Closed out at 215 domestic. Worldwide, it did $546 million. So a little bit less than $100 million more than the original. Production budget went up significantly to 125. But another big win, another huge win, very profitable film for Paramount. And it stayed with Paramount for the last 6 movies, for the last 22 years. It's still within that studio system. Okay, so that was number 2. Number 3, Mission Impossible 3, which I don't think I ever saw, opened up May 5th, 2020. One thing I'll note about the Mission Impossible movies, and I was sort of BSing with my friends about this, it is one of those movie series where you see them all. And I now remember, I did actually see Mission Impossible 3, but I don't remember anything about it. And it's one of those series of movies. It's just, they're always coming out. They're always somewhat similar. They're really exciting and enjoyable, but you don't really remember them all that well. And so that was the case for me in Mission Impossible 3. I was trying to remember, like, what happened in Mission Impossible 1? All I remember is, like, the gum on the aquarium, which was cool and it blows up. And then him, of course, the iconic scene from Mission Impossible where he was using the the harness and stuff to lower himself into the computer room, the static room, whatever you want to call it. Mission Impossible 2 and 3. All I remember from Mission Impossible 2 is some sort of bike. Did John Woo direct that one? I don't know. It just seemed nuts. I don't remember anything from Mission Impossible 3. But that did open May 5th, 2006, so 6 years after the second one. Long break there. Did not do as well. Production budget increased to 150 from 125. It opened at $47 million, so $10 million less than the original. You count for inflation too over 6 years, not a great opening for Mission Impossible 3. It closed out at 134, significantly lower than MI2, which closed it at 215. Worldwide gross was about 150 million off Mission Impossible 2. It ended up at 397 for Mission Impossible 3. So a little bit of a lull here, a little bit of an underperformance for this series. Comes back 5 years later. It's crazy, like the separation of the years here, because usually with a sequel it's like 1 or 2, it's like 2 years usually. Sometimes with horror movies you can do like 1 year, like Scream for instance, Scream 1, Scream 2, that was 1 year apart. With these bigger action movies, 2 to 3 years. These are 4 years, 6 years, 5 years. That's a long time in between. So Mission Impossible 4 opened up on December 16th, 2011. It opened up at $29 million, which seems super low, right? But it's the holiday, so everything's really depressed and everything has really good legs. Just look at like The Greatest Showman and Jumanji from this last December. Opened kind of muted, especially Greatest Showman, but then ended up doing like what, 179 or something total? Crazy. So that's sort of what happened here with Mission Impossible 4. Opened up at 29, closed out at 209 domestic, 694 worldwide. The best performer. That's crazy. Like, that international number is so high. It was a 70% international, 30% domestic breakdown there. Mission Impossible was one of the first series where the global numbers ended up being a little bit more important than the domestic numbers. And now that's kind of the norm, just because overseas markets have grown so much. But Mission Impossible was one of the first series of movies that where the Chinese and the European and South American grosses really mattered a lot to its total, especially with MI4, which did 485 alone just internationally. Okay, so that was the high point of the series up until now. MI Rogue Nation, I think I saw this movie, I can't remember. Came out 3 years ago, July 31st, 2015, 4 years after MI4. It opened up at $55 million, closed out at $195 domestically, did $47 foreign for a worldwide gross of $682. So really kind of level with MI4. Great performance overall. The production budgets have stayed pretty flat since MI3 at about the 150 mark. And now Mission Impossible 6. We're 22 years after the original movie, 3 years after the last one. It's opening here at $61.2 million, the best opening of the series. Now, if we account for inflation, probably not the case. But the expectation here is, in terms of a multiplier, these movies tend to have really strong multipliers. I'm not sure why that is. I think it has to do with Tom Cruise, and people just in general really enjoy him in this role. And it's a type of movie where people don't necessarily rush out to see it opening weekend, but on its second and third weekend, when people are looking for something to see, it's the tried and true Mission Impossible series. They know that they can buy a ticket and sort of escape for 2 hours with insane stunts and action and stuff like that. And I think that's exactly what MI6 is all about. So where's this thing going to go? Well, let's take a look what happened on Monday and Tuesday, because we have those numbers in now. 6.8 million on Monday, 9.4 million on Tuesday. Obviously, the big increase on Tuesday is going to be from the discount Tuesdays. So usually it's like $5 tickets across the U.S. and Canada. So that's why you're going to see some significant increases on that Tuesday. In terms of those good numbers, yeah, they're pretty good numbers. That's a really strong increase for that Tuesday. So the question is, where's this thing going to go? Even before we get to that, let's talk a little bit about who showed up on opening weekend for this movie. These numbers are from ComScore Screen Engine's post-track survey system. About 41% of the opening weekend audience was men over 25, 33% was females over 25. That's a pretty high number, total of people over 25 years old. It looks like 74% of the total audience was over 25. Not that surprising. MI tends to play a little bit older, especially since the series started 22 years ago. People my age, I'm 35, they're going on 36 now. They tend to be the core audience for a movie like this. Men under 25 was 17%. Females under 25 was 9%. So a smaller audience for that under 25 portion, or age group, I should say. Positive score, this is from PostTrack, 84% positive score, 65% recommend. These are fantastic numbers, meaning the audience really enjoyed it. Cinema Score had a little bit of different breakdown, 55% male, 45% female. Typically, it's going to play a little better with males. One interesting note, overall in the Cinema Score, it got an A. Interesting to note that the 18 to 24 demographic on Cinema Score given an A+. So the younger audience may have not been a huge portion of the people who went to go see it opening weekend, but they loved it more than any other group, which I think is pretty cool to see that. Overall, A score, which makes sense based on what you saw with the critic score at a 97-98% Rotten Tomatoes. That A Cinema Score falls right in line with that. So our critics and audiences agree that this is a great movie. So what does that mean in terms of the multiplier, and where is it going to go overall? So 61 opening weekend, a movie like this with kind of a somewhat quiet August, just starting today, you're looking at least a 3x multiplier, which puts it at 183. I think 200 is probably going to be the basement for this. I think it's going to have a really strong multiplier. That would require a multiplier of 2.27, almost 2.28, or sorry, 3.28, which is a really strong multiplier. But for a movie like this in the series, they just tend to play they play really well in the later months of its release. So the legs should be pretty strong here. How does it end up worldwide? If you look at the breakdowns here, it's going to do probably at least 60% of its gross in foreign markets outside the United States and Canada. So I think that, let's just assume that that's the case. It does 60%. It's probably going to do a little bit more because the last movie did 71%. So let's just assume it's going to do 65% of its take internationally. So that would leave 35% for the domestic market. You're looking at 571 as the total take overall, which would be below Rogue Nation and Mission Impossible. But it could, these are conservative estimates, I would say. I'm not sort of like thinking it's going to be this amazing, massive hit overall. I guess you're looking at what, 666 as a potential gross here if it has the same 70-30 foreign to domestic breakdown from the last two movies. So I would say my guesstimate would probably be about $630 million, somewhere in that range. So a really big win for MI6. I think it's a much needed win for Paramount. They had A Quiet Place, which really overperformed earlier this year. The studio has a new head. Jim Giannopoulos now leads Paramount, and so this is sort of, I think, his first big run and test here. Obviously, he didn't set up these movies, but under his new tenure, things are going pretty well for Paramount. It was looking very dicey for that studio over the last couple of years. I thought they were going to get bought maybe last year, and it looked even more likely this year until A Quiet Place really took off, and now you got MI6 doing so well, so maybe they're going to be able to survive on their own. Well, they're not really on their own. They're owned by Viacom, but I think that they will not sell if they continue to have this successful performance. Okay, so that was number one this weekend was Mission Impossible Fallout. Number two is Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again. And this is the weekend number, 15.1 million. A strangely high 57% drop. It actually added some theaters, about 200 theaters this weekend. So its second weekend per theater average $4,300. That I don't know. There's something about that drop that seems too high. It was front loaded in the weekend. The previews were high, and Friday was high, and then it started to drop off on that Saturday, Sunday. But I thought it would have a drop a little bit more in the high 40s. The fact that it's pushing the high 50s doesn't seem like the legs are going to be all that fantastic, which is a really big surprise because the last Mamma Mia movie had outrageous legs. So maybe there's just like, there's not a sort of second wave audience for this film. Maybe, I'm not sure. Maybe it's just an anomaly for this weekend. Maybe people will start showing up this weekend and next weekend. I'm not really sure, but not a great performance in its second weekend. In terms of what it's done the last couple of days, it was in second on Monday and Tuesday. Did $2.6 million on Monday and $3.8 million on Tuesday yesterday, with a 48% increase on that Tuesday, Discount Tuesday, which is really a strong number for Mamma Mia. So maybe it can turn it around a bit. But that was number 2 for the weekend of July 27th through the 29th, with a little update on Monday and Tuesday's numbers. Total take so far for Mamma Mia, here we go again, Mamma Mia 2, $70.5 million. So overall, it's doing well. It's just a little bit concerning that drop was so severe in its second weekend. Speaking of severe drops, coming in number 3 this weekend was Equalizer 2. $14 million, a 61% drop for the Denzel Washington film. A really surprising performance in its first weekend. So the fact that it dropped 61% isn't that much of a shock. But I don't know, like the movie seemed like people really liked it. Critics weren't necessarily all that kind to it, but I think audiences really warmed to it. They love Denzel Washington. Who doesn't love Denzel Washington? And I think, it was the biggest opener for Denzel. The scores internally seemed pretty strong. But at the same time, when you think about it, it's a one-off action movie. I think the timing was just really right. And then, of course, MI6 opens, which is the same sort of demographic or genre audience. So it does make sense that Equalizer 2 would drop off this much. Total take so far for Equalizer 2 is $64.2 million in its second weekend. Coming in at number 4 this last weekend was Hotel Transylvania 3, Summer Vacation. $12.2 million for the weekend, a 48% drop, which is okay for a children's film. You would expect something mid-40s or lower. Starting to lose theaters, lost 262 theaters. Per theater average for Hotel Transylvania 3, Summer Vacation was $3,000 per theater in its third weekend. Total take so far is $119 million. This one had a pretty big jump for the Tuesday discount day. Did $1.8 million on Monday, and Hotel Transylvania 3 did $3 million, a 64% jump from Monday to Tuesday. So that's pretty typical with the Tuesday discount. I think there's just a lot of kids are out of school and stuff, and parents want to save some money when they take their kids to the movies. Another children's film was in number 5. Teen Titans Go to the Movies did $10.4 million on its opening weekend. In 3,200 theaters, per theater average was just over $3,250. The budget in this one was $10 million. I didn't really know how this one was going to go. I didn't have any background in this movie and no knowledge of it really. And I'm not great with children's films. I don't have kids, so I don't pay attention to what's coming out with them. I try to wrap my head around these movies. But it's hard, especially a movie like Teen Titans, where it's not really a marquee opening. Like Incredibles 2 I'll follow and I'll understand what's going on, but with something like this, it's just so small that I can't get the details that I want out of it. And I'm honestly not really all that interested in movies like this. So I don't have much to say about Teen Titans 2. We'll see where it goes in the second weekend. That opening, compared to the production budget, seems good. I was expecting this thing to open at 15-20, kind of at least. So maybe I just read it wrong. It's a Warner Brothers movie, so it's a big studio. You got to hope that the drops here this upcoming weekend are way below 50%. Hopefully for this movie, it's at like 40%. But we'll see. Maybe it's just not a market for this film right now. Okay, so that was number 5. Number 6 this weekend was Ant-Man and the Wasp, $8.7 million, a 47% drop, which is pretty good. Starting to lose theaters, lost 765 theaters. Its per theater average in its fourth weekend for Ant-Man and the Wasp was $2,900 per theater. Total take so far is 183. That puts to bed the ridiculous arguments that were going online about whether Ant-Man and the Wasp was going to beat Ant-Man for its domestic take. I mean, I don't know what people are thinking. And I am by no stretch of the imagination an MCU fanboy. I am an MCU like hard critic and skeptic, but not. I had to defend this movie online multiple times from people saying it wasn't going to hit 180 and it's not going to hit 200 million. I mean, they're fools. Like, if it opens as big as it did, what was it, like 76 or something like that? So it's a no-brainer that MCU movie like this is gonna have a decent multiplier and do pretty well, especially because it has a smaller opening. And you know, the original Ant-Man had what, like nearly a 3x multiplier? No, it was way over 3x. Now I'm thinking about it, because it opened at like 50 and closed at 180. So this thing I think is gonna waltz into over $200 million domestically. Internationally, it's gonna do well as well, and so it's gonna be a win for MCU. But like I talked about last show in a little bit of rant, it's not a great movie, and I say that trying to be fair and objective about it. I watched it and I was like, I don't mind the MCU movies as long as they're well done and engaging. Like Guardians, both of Guardians movies I really enjoyed. They were fun. You know, Wonder Woman I liked, so I'm not like against Logan's a masterpiece. Don't even get me started on Logan. It's so good. This just, Ant-Man and the Wasp just feels like it is so much third wave pre-Deadpool comic book movie, right? It feels like it's just 5 or 6 years out of place. I didn't really find it very engaging. I didn't find it all that enjoyable. Maybe the MCU fanboys and that whole group of people feels differently about it, but I don't know. Its performance has been decent. It hasn't been fantastic. I would be a little bit concerned that it didn't open over $100 million. It seemed like MCU could do no wrong there for the last few movies. Everything was opening way over tracking, and this one's just sort of landed on the lower side of its tracking. So I don't know. I'm not sure where it's going to go or what it means for MCU at large. I'm not sure if they're going to do a third one. I think if they do move forward with a third Ant-Man movie, it definitely needs a new director. Hell, go hire Edgar Wright. Give him a chance to do this thing right. You know, I didn't like the original Ant-Man either. I just feel like they're very minor, somewhat throwaway films. That's not the worst thing in the world when you do that, but within the MCU brand, it has to be bold, and vibrant, and big. That's what makes those movies work, and this Ant-Man movie just isn't that. But besides my own personal feelings about it and the broad view of the MCU and where it's going, this is a winner, and it's doing pretty well. Number 7 this weekend was Incredibles 2, 7.2 million, 39% drop. It's starting to lose. Lost about 550 theaters this weekend. Per theater average was $2,700, almost $2,800. Total take so far for Incredibles 2 is $572 million. Smash, home run, grand slam. Going to be one of the biggest movies of the year, probably top 3 of the year, I would say. You know, there's not much more I can say. It just crossed the billion mark worldwide. I think it's the fastest animated film ever to $1 billion. So it's broken all the records you could possibly think of. It's way overperformed even the most optimistic expectations for this film. So Disney has just a massive win on their hands with Incredibles 2. Let's keep this train rolling. Number 8 was Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. Did $6.7 million over this weekend. Minus 40%. That's a very strong drop for Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. That was the thing we were going to look at. Like, the opening was kind of depressed. It's nowhere near the original. Overall performance is all going to come down to those drops in the 4th and 5th weekend. And now in the 6th weekend, it's starting to lose a lot of theaters. Lost 700 theaters. Per theater average is an okay $2,500 in its 6th weekend. Total take so far for Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom is $397. I kind of want to take a closer look at this one just really quickly, so bear with me. I want to see how it is doing on the daily box office compared to the other Jurassic Park World films, or Jurassic Park World films, whatever that means. Jurassic World films. So it's, wow. This is really interesting. It really puts it into context, right? When you compare it to the original series, Jurassic Park: Lost World and Jurassic Park 3, it looks like it's doing very well. Now you can throw in inflation, that's going to change the story a bit, because the original Jurassic Park was 25 years ago, wasn't it? Yeah. But when you compare it to the last Jurassic World, which was, a huge hit, and the amount of that win that it had was very odd and surprising and abnormal. It blew everybody's socks off, essentially, when it comes down to its performance. At this point in its release, in its 40th day of release, Jurassic World had made $614 million domestically alone. And right now, Jurassic World 2, Fallen Kingdom, whatever the hell you want to call it, is only sitting at $399. So that's the story. Like, you can try and spin it this way or that way. A lot of nerds online were trying to say, "Oh, it's the second one, it's different. Jurassic World was lightning in the bottle." All these other sort of, they're not really excuses, but they don't. A lot of times when people argue why a film is doing good or bad, they're usually just sort of spewing their bias about that film, whether they like the original or not. I hated the original Jurassic World. I thought it was a terrible movie. And I watched it like 4 or 5 times just because, I don't know, I'm a huge Jurassic Park fan, and like I like movies like that. And I just love to watch movies repeatedly just to see how they're made and get a feel for them. I'm a film, nerd, so I tend to watch things over and over again. It's not a good movie, but it did 614, right? And by its 40th day, you cannot argue with that performance. The fact that Jurassic World 2 is only at $399 is a significant underperformance. You expect the sequel to do around what the original did. In most cases, you expect the sequel to do more than the original. That's why you're making the film, to make more money. Now, is Jurassic World DOS Fallen Kingdom, is that going to lose money for Universal? No, it's not going to lose money. But the profits just aren't going to be anywhere near the original. I mean, not even close. And the production budgets were pretty similar. And I imagine the marketing budgets, it probably was more for the second one because they put more on the line here, thinking it was going to do so well like the original. With the original, remember, they were tracking it at 120 and opened up at over $200 million. So the marketing spend up to that point was looking like a $120 million opener. The marketing spend for this one was probably looking like a $200 million opener. So they spent probably a lot more money on marketing this time to front load it. And it's just not played out all that well. Now, in terms of a profit for this movie, I'm thinking at least $100 million profit, but the expectation was probably $200 to $300 million of profit. So that's a significant underperformance. Now, is it a flop? Absolutely not. It's not a flop. If it's a profitable movie, it's not a flop. You can't make that argument that it's not successful if it does make a profit, significant profit. If it breaks even, you might be able to make the flop argument. But that's not going to happen with Jurassic World 2. So it's not a flop, but it is a pretty significant underperformance, especially to the expectations, I think, internally and industry-wide. Now, when the trailer first dropped, I think everybody sort of knew what was going to happen. It didn't look good. It didn't look exciting. It looked like a copy of Lost World to some degree. The weird Budweiser product placement in the teaser trailer. Nothing clicked like it did with the original, and that's what it takes to make $600 million worldwide, or sorry, even just domestically. That's not going to happen with Jurassic World 2. So I don't know. I don't know if they're going to do the third one. I feel like they got to bring in a new director, kind of like the Ant-Man situation. Second one is doing. It's sort of it's underperforming to expectations to some degree. And I think for Jurassic World, a new director, maybe a new set of main characters, just try something new to really spark some hype with the audiences to get them to come out and maybe push another $200 million opening. The series of films in that brand is strong enough where I think it could support an opening weekend over $200 million every single time. But they really screwed it up this time. It just was not an interesting movie. So that's Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. Doing okay, but definitely an underperformance. Number 9 this weekend was Skyscraper. 53% drop, $5.3 million. In its third weekend, it has made $59 million total. Not a good performance. This is going to be a flop. I think losses probably in the $50 to $100 million range overall. It lost 1,000 theaters this weekend, Per theater average has dropped below the Mendoza line in its third weekend at $1,900. I talked about this one at length the last couple of weekends. I think the big takeaway here is I don't blame overexposure of Dwayne Johnson. I just don't see that. It's not even like a teaser trailer, just like an on-set teaser trailer for Jungle Cruise came out today, and it's super viral and it's hyped and people love it. He's co-starring with Emily Blunt. It feels like a great little connection there. Dwayne Johnson is a grade A movie star, and that's not going to go away over the next decade. He's always going to be in these big movies, and I think for the most part, a lot of them are going to perform well because of his presence. He couldn't really save Skyscraper. It was a bad idea. It was a bad film. The marketing was not good. It seemed very... the visuals are very sort of muddy and muted and too dark and too gray. It just didn't look like a really enjoyable film to see, and that's why I think it has underperformed so significantly. And it's definitely a flop because it's going to lose money. But that was number 10. That was number 9. Number 10 was The First Purge, still sticking around, 2.2 million, 57% drop this last weekend. Lost 900 theaters. Per theater average in its fourth weekend is $1,600. Total take so far for The First Purge on a $13 million production budget is $65 million domestically. I wonder what the international market is for that film. It's probably not very big. Yeah, it's mostly domestic, 66 domestic, 45.6 foreign. It's for a worldwide total of 111, almost $112 million for The First Purge, I guess, which is a prequel. And I believe, what is it? It's the fourth movie in the Purge series. I gotta double check that. Yeah, it is the fourth movie. It's already doing better than the original. Based on the numbers that I'm seeing, it should pass The Purge Anarchy. I don't know if it's going to make it to The Purge election year, which did $79 million total domestically, and that was just 2 years ago. So it's been 4 movies over the last 5 years. They're really pumping these out. So I don't know. It's a good performance. It's a profitable performance. I don't know if it's good enough to do another one, or maybe they just might do a whole reboot. This was a prequel movie to the others, so it's kind of like when you're doing prequels, you're sort of getting to the creative end of the road for a series, it feels like. That's like when you also do like parodies. So I don't know what the story is on the next Purge movie. It's Blumhouse, so they could pump one out in like a year easily, or they could just shelve it. I could see them shelving this for a good 3 years, it would be my guess. Because the performance was good, but it wasn't like amazing enough where it's going to make $200 million of profits. They're going to pump one out a year from now. I don't see that happening. So I think there's going to be a little bit of a lull here for the Purge series. Okay, so that was the top 10. Anything outside the top 10 worth talking about? Unfriended Dark Web from the one and only Blumhouse, but this is the Blumhouse Tilt imprint, which does... micro budgets. This one was made for $1 million, literally $1 billion is the production budget. Insane. Then they sort of smart bomb in on specific demographics. This, in this case, probably men under the age of 25 in certain areas of the country. Total take on that one was 7.3 million. Not a great take for that. I guarantee you the marketing was well over that. And keep in mind, Blumhouse Tilt is only going to take 50% of total grosses domestically. So right now they're sitting on maybe $4 million total take for that. There's no way that's going to cover all the marketing and stuff. Huge flop, no, but probably kind of breaking even underperformance. Maybe it makes a lot more money with VOD and streaming, but I doubt it. It doesn't look like a very good movie. Also outside the top 10 was Sorry to Bother You. This is a movie we've been following very closely from Annapurna. This is the Sundance darling. It has reached its nadir, I think, over the last couple of weeks, and I called that was going to happen. It's only in its fourth week, but it's starting to lose theaters. I think it capped at about just over 1,000 theaters was its peak number of theaters, and now it is losing 250 this last weekend. Per theater average is an unhealthy 1,700. This one, it's going away now, and I thought there was a chance for this one to jump that canyon between art house darling, I should say, and mass wide release hit. Some of the movies that have been able to sort of get across that would be like The Big Sick was a good example of a movie that was, Amazon Studios, definitely art house, but then made an impact on wide audiences. or wide release in the masses. Manchester by the Sea was another example. Lady Bird. Now they didn't make $100 million. I think they all made around $40 million. But you know, in comparison to Sorry to Bother You, it's starting to cap out at 13. It's still going to make some good money over the next few weeks, but you know, I gotta think it's going to cap out at like 25 or something like that. Maybe it hits 20, somewhere around 20, I would guess. So it didn't make that leap, really. It wasn't able to cross that border or cross that canyon. And I called that, because this is the type of movie that it's going to play insanely well in Los Angeles, Seattle, New York, Chicago, Houston, big cities, because it's just a movie meant for people who live in big cities. Just the style of it, just the topic of it. It was arty, it was edgy, it was hip. I guarantee you, every single friend I have in Brooklyn has already seen this movie. It's a movie made for, you know, people like me who are super into arty flicks that do really interesting things, but that's not going to play in Omaha or San Antonio or Des Moines. It's just not. There's not an audience there for a movie like this, which is why this Annapurna release collapsed when it tried to go wide. And it did collapse, and there's no other way to put it. It only made it to 1,000 theaters. If it was a really a good play with wide release audiences, it would be up to 2,500, 3,000, and it never got there. But you know, is it going to lose money? Probably not. But I think Annapurna wanted this really to break through, and it didn't do that. Eighth Grade is another movie to talk about from A24. This is another Sundance darling. I think it was Sundance. So much buzz with this. Critics absolutely love it. It's got a 99 score on Rotten Tomatoes from 144 reviewers. Only 2 gave it a rotten score. Overall rating is 8.8 out of 10. I mean, this is astounding numbers from the critics. They absolutely adore this film. This one's going to be an award darling, I believe. Its performance at the box office is pretty good. 1.2 million this last weekend. Total take so far is 2.9 million in its third weekend. The key here is the expansion strategy for Eighth Grade. It started on about 23 screens, I think. Or maybe 33 screens, something like that. Bigger than your 4-screen opening, but not like a 100-screen opening. And they just sort of added a small group each weekend. It's now up to 158 screens. Per theater average is 8,000 at that level. You know, I thought this had a better chance to break out than Sorry to Bother You, but I'm getting a similar vibe. Critics are gushing about it. Urban audiences, cosmopolitan audiences are responding very well to it. It's selling out in New York and Los Angeles. I don't think it's going to make the leap across the canyon from art house to mass wide release hit. It doesn't seem that it's going to make it. I thought it had the potential to do it just because of the subject matter and the style of the film. It felt approachable. It felt palatable for people in the middle of the country or from smaller cities or from non-massive cities. I don't even know what to call it. It's not even like an urban-rural divide. It's like a cultural divide more than anything. Because, like, I don't know, is Eighth Grade going to play well in Atlanta, which is a massive city? I don't know. Is it going to play well in Dallas? These are, you know, cities with like 3-4 million people. You would assume it would have a similar pattern to a New York City or a Los Angeles, but it doesn't at all. So I don't see it doing well outside the cosmopolitan cities, as I'll call them. And that's too bad. I felt like this had a chance to really make a breakthrough, like a Lady Bird, which is also from A24. But maybe I'm wrong. We'll see how much it expands over the next few weeks. It might be on the release schedule here. I can check that out in a bit. But we'll see how it plays out. It does have a chance still to break out, but I'm not really seeing it in the current numbers. Number 15 this last weekend was another movie I wanted to sort of highlight. Three Identical Strangers from Neon. 1.2 million. Total take so far for Three Identical Strangers is 6.6 million. This is just like a little movie that could. It's a documentary. I guess it's a documentary, isn't it? It's a real story. Maybe it's a dramatization of the real story. I'm not really sure at this point. There's been a lot of buzz about it online. Great marketing for it from Neon. It's sitting at almost 6.7 million. It's slowly but surely adding screens. Added 100 theaters last weekend. and its fifth weekend. This one is a little bit surprising to me. When it first opened, I was not seeing a breakout. But looking at this now, it's doing okay. And it had a 19% drop this last weekend. So maybe word of mouth and this very slow rollout has played to its favor. But those are the numbers for Three Identical Strangers. We'll keep an eye on that one. Won't You Be My Neighbors just broke $20 million this weekend. Documentaries are on fire this year. And that's mostly what I want to talk about. Oh, I guess Leave No Trace. God, did that do nothing. That's too bad. From Bleecker Street, Ben Foster, huge Sundance buzz on this one. Should have a ton of awards nominations, but it's only breaking $4.6 million in its fifth weekend. And it's starting to lose theaters, so it's already capped out. Its best weekends behind it now. Per theater average is not great at 1,600 and only 289 theaters. I thought that one had a better chance of doing well, but it didn't play out that way. I think the summer release really hurt that one. That one could have been shelved, I think, towards the winter. Because it had so much buzz, I feel like the Oscar movie season would have helped that one. And I think it just got lost in the summer. Okay, so that's mostly it for the rundown. I will talk a little bit about let's see what's going on in the next couple of weeks, just to see what lies ahead. This next weekend, August 3rd, which is, I guess, the movie's open tomorrow technically, because tomorrow is Thursday. Darkest Minds, Death of a Nation, Christopher Robin, The Spy Who Dumped Me. So let's take a look at Hollywood Stock Exchange just to see what they're saying about these movies. I love like tracking and stuff, and I love the industry, and those are really fascinating numbers and data. But sometimes Hollywood Stock Exchange to me feels a little bit more like the pulse of all the nerds. It's like the combined power of every single box office nerd in the world is playing Hollywood Stock Exchange. So they're saying 85 price now for one share of Christopher Robin. That translates to essentially usually divide the share price by 2.7. I'm not going to get into what the share price means, but we're just going to use that as a rule for right now. So they're saying it's going to open at about 31. That's what tracking is saying for Christopher Robin, so probably the low 30s on that one. Spy Who Dumped Me is significantly lower. Its share price is at $44 right now on the Hollywood Stock Exchange. They are projecting about a $16 million opening for The Spy Who Dumped Me. That seems about right to me. It could break out. It's got Mila Kunis and what's her name from SNL? Kate McKinnon, Justin Theroux, Gillian Anderson is in it. Interesting. I do wonder. It's a rated R action movie, rated R action comedy. It seems more like a rated R comedy to me. They're dumping it in August. The marketing just started a couple of weeks ago. I hadn't even heard about it until 2 weeks ago. I don't know. This one, I think, unfortunately, is getting dumped in August. No pun on the name, but yeah, I don't expect it to open over 20. I think it might even go lower, like 11, 12, than what Hollywood Stock Exchange is saying and tracking. Darkest Minds isn't going to be very big. And then Eighth Grade it does look like it's expanding this weekend. Let me see if I can get some exact numbers. Oh, so A24 is pushing it wide this weekend to 1,080 screens, or theaters, I should say. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 technically wide release openers this weekend. So it should be pretty busy out there. I think I don't really see any of them breaking out. I think Christopher Robin has a chance to break out and do really well. 31 seems low to me for a movie like this. I was thinking more like 50 or 40 to 50. That's just what I'm seeing based on the trailers and sort of the concept of the film, and it looks like the quality is pretty high. It's Disney. It's Winnie the Pooh. I don't know. I felt like they kind of mismarketed this, and I'm not sure why they're releasing it in the first week of August. It seems more like an October or November release. I don't know. So we'll see how that one does. I do think, Mission Impossible drops about 50%. You're looking at high 20s, low 30s. It seems like Christopher Robin will win the weekend. Then coming up after that, you have The Meg, I'm really interested to see what Hollywood Stock Exchange is saying. They're saying 55 total for a single share of the Meg. That would put it at about a $20 million opening. I honestly, I have no idea how to read this movie. No clue what it's going to do. It could open at 8. It could open at 50. I have no idea how the Meg is going to play. I thought it was pretty quiet, but looking at this week, there's 5 wide release openers. Then it's going to be very crowded when you get to August 10th. So, and I think MI6 is still going to be playing well. That sort of cuts into the same audience. What would you rather go see if you haven't seen either of them yet? Probably MI6 because it's going to be awesome. The Meg, you just don't know. It's an unknown property. Also coming out that weekend is The Slender Man. I don't think that's going to do very well at all. Black KK Klansman from Spike Lee. I think that's going wide. It's not listed as wide, but so maybe they're going to do a limited release on that from Focus Features on the 10th. I'm not sure. 17th is Alpha and Mile 22. Those don't look like they're going to do all that well. Alpha's going to do significantly worse, I think, than Mile 22. Mile 22's got a decent cast, so you never know with Wahlberg and what's her name, Lauren from Walking Dead. I like that cast, so I think it might pop off a bit. The big movie in August, I think, is going to be, and maybe not a big surprise anymore because it's been all over the place in terms of publications like Hollywood Reporter. I think it was on the cover. Crazy Rich Asians, I think, is going to break out pretty significantly. On Hollywood Stock Exchange, are listing at a similar price to Meg, so they're thinking like a $20 million opening. I think that might be too low. Now, keep in mind, Asian Americans in the U.S. and Canada are only about, 7% of the population, I want to say. But never underestimate when a movie is served up to and targets an underserved group of people. They will show up in droves to see it and support it. And so I do think that Crazy Rich Asians will break out significantly. I could see a 25-30 million plus opening for that. And that'll be, I think, the big story of August. Then you have Happy Time Murders coming out, and Axel. And Searching, I think, is another one that's going to break out. It's only listed at $18 a share now on Hollywood Stock Exchange, which translates to approximately about $6 or $7 million opening weekend. Keep your eye on that one. I feel like that could be a really big breakout. In fact, I'm going to buy 100,000 shares of that right now. I think that price is way too low for Searching. Keep an eye on that one. And then we sort of close it out with Kin, The Little Stranger, Operation Finale. I don't know what these movies are. They don't look like they're going to do anything significant. And that is the close out of August into September. And then we're talking Labor Day, The Nun, Peppermint, God Bless the Broken Road. I don't know what the hell that is. The Nun's going to be, I think, massive. And the It movie last year did what, 120 something? Surprised everybody. September is usually a very quiet month at the box office, almost like a February. But it did so well and proved that Labor Day could be a massive holiday for the box office. So I think we'll see a horror movie released every year on that Labor Day weekend now. I think it's going to become a tradition that It has started last year. I believe the next It comes out next year on that weekend, and I'm sure someone's going to take the 2020 slot for that first weekend in September. Okay, guys, that's all I got for right now. I want to do a little sort of midweek show to get caught up. I will be doing a show on Sunday when the numbers come in, so probably Sunday around noonish or 1ish, I'll post the new show, and we'll talk about all these huge wide release openers that are going on this weekend. In any event, thanks for listening, guys. Do follow me on Twitter. I tweet a lot now. And also check out the podcast on all the different platforms. But like I said at the beginning of the show, I usually pay most attention to YouTube. So if you have a question or comment, just post one there. Thanks for listening. This has been the Wildline Podcast.